The volley of court filings that stops with Florida's new abortion law firmly in place. President Biden announced an executive order Friday protecting abortion access nationally, though in Florida, the new abortion restrictions ping-ponged between enforceable, unconstitutional, on hold, and now back in effect.
A judge in Tallahassee had first ruled that Florida's new 15-week law violated the privacy clause in the state constitution, and he issued an injunction. The state, however, appealed, and that law remains in effect during the appeal process.
With us now to get some well-rounded clarity is Tewannah Aman, who is the director of the Broward chapter of Florida Right to Life, and Mayte Canino is deputy organizing director of Planned Parenthood for Southeast and North Florida. Ladies, it is so good to have you with us on this Sunday morning.
Thank you. Thank you. Great to be here.
Great. We are so glad that you are, especially Tewannah. We strive to be balanced here, and we're glad that you are here. So let me begin with a basic question. You're quite welcome. The fundamental question, I believe, for most people, been debated all of my adult life, is whether a woman has the fundamental right to decide whether to carry a pregnancy to term or to have an abortion beforehand. And obviously the pro-choice side says that is her right, and for 50 years it was the law of the land. Why was that law wrong, and why do you believe that in fact there is a compelling state interest to get involved here?
Well, I think that it was never a constitutional. It's not in the Constitution about the right to abortion. Even the Florida Constitution with the privacy laws, they were written, if you look at the intent in the late 70s and early 80s, it was dealing with information privacy. It wasn't dealing with the right to an abortion. And having had an abortion myself, having suffered physically and emotionally from it, I feel that it took me time to understand that life begins at conception, that like the 15-week ban, this child is in the womb, kicking and moving around with arms and legs and fingers and toes. And at 15 weeks, they literally have to dismember and dismantle that baby and put it back together. It is not a blob. It is not a mass. And I think what's sad is women believe that they have a right, and their rights trump the right of the child. And we believe that every life has a right to life.
So, Tewannah, thank you for that. I want to talk about the law here and now in Florida because it has ping-ponged in the past couple of days back and forth legally. And you both belong to organizations that counsel pregnant women. And so from both of you, and Mayte, let's start with you. I'd love to hear what you are counseling and telling your clients now relative to where Florida is legally with abortion access.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today. So we talk to our patients when they come in about, first we talk to them and give them education about what they're going to be doing, making sure that they're there on their own will, and then talk to them about, because there's a lot of confusion. A lot of people think because of what happened in the Supreme Court, abortion is not legal in the country right now, and it is. It all depends on what state you're in. So we let them know what is the rules and regulations we have here. For example, the 24-hour waiting period. So when they come to us, we're not going to have the procedure that day, but we'll do the education, and we will go over with them what the process is going to look like. And then they're going to go home and come back for their second appointment, which unfortunately is not 24 hours after, just because of so many appointments that we have. It might take a few days. So it's prolonging the procedure to happen for them. So that is what we're talking to our patients when they come in the door to see us. We give them all information, any questions that they ask, and we make sure also to screen to make sure that they're there on their own will, not victims of violence or domestic violence, or someone's making them do that.
Yeah. Mayte, let me ask you, we know that the law as it's written now in the state of Florida, that approximately 95% of women who have an abortion, and there were roughly 80,000 of them in the last year in Florida, that 94% of them have an abortion in the first trimester. So what is the hardship, as it were, not neglecting the 6% who have a later abortion, but what is the hardship about a 15-week limit?
What we see, most of the women that come to us, they come in earlier in the pregnancy. The ones that we see that come in later in their pregnancy is due to problem in the pregnancy, because you can't really see those fetal anomalies until after the 15-week time. We do also will get victims of sexual violence, incest, that come later because of the trauma that they have incurred. It takes them a while to realize that they are pregnant, and there's no exception for that in this law for them. So those are the patients we see. It's to us, even though we hear all the time it's 16% or 3%, every person that walks in our door is an important person. Every reason is important for them. And we want to make sure they receive the care that they need. I talk to our doctors all the time, and their greatest fear is with this new law, the 15-week law, is that someone's going to come because they're going to need an abortion, and they're going to have to send them away, send them somewhere else when they're seeking this in the hardest time of their life. When they're seeking abortion, they're gonna have to go to North Carolina or somewhere else. You know, at the end of the day, they're medical providers, and we're stepping in by making these restrictions that are not medically necessary between their patient and doctor privilege that they have.
Tewannah, that's I want to pick up on that with you.
Sure.
Your perspective and your organization is a faith-based
Yes,
organization.
absolutely.
And so the legal case that is still in play right now is based on the privacy protections that the state affords. So talk to us a little bit about it. This case really makes what the judge considered to be a good case, that the law violates privacy protections of women. How do you see that?
Well, you know, you have to do the research. I mean, I was doing that over the past couple of days in relation to when the privacy law was written, and it was about the intrusion of information, taking the government, getting information from us, the government intruding in our lives in that respect, not in respect to an abortion. I think that, you know, having had an abortion myself, and like the representative from Planned Parenthood, there's both sides to the coin. But when you look at the 15-week ban, we're not talking about the heartbeat ban. We're talking about the 15 weeks where this child is literally dismembered. And when you look at the statistics,
can I just go on record as saying there is science that shows otherwise, and I just wanted to throw that out there.
Well, let me just say that the Florida Department of Health, the Office of Vital Statistics, shows the majority of women are in their 20s who have abortions, over 60, almost 60%, that the majority are elective, that the anomalies and the life endangerment are low percentage-wise. I mean, we're talking less than 4 or 5%. So when you look at the numbers and you see that a lot of women, I mean, I counsel a lot of women that are going into the abortion facilities, and it's not the right time. I'm not ready. I've got the career and the college. And I feel like abortion is now a method of birth control, because what's happening is the woman decides, hey, I can go out, and surely there's difficult things that women get themselves into. But I've counseled a lot of women that it's just not the right time, including myself. That was my reason. And I feel like, you know, this is not just a method of birth control. When you're looking, we all began in our mother's womb. You, Glenna, and Michael, and us, we're all here because our moms chose life. And we never know what that child will end up becoming. And I feel like we play like we're God and decide the fate of an individual when we look at circumstances, and we don't know how those circumstances will change. And I know I've been in prison ministry for a number of years, and I've seen so much redemption and so much healing and so much restoration and so many lives changed, that I feel like we're making a judgment call. And I think, to me, being, you know, pro-life and having had an abortion and being pro-abortion myself, it was the most selfish thing I ever did. Because if you want a baby, you celebrate the baby, you celebrate life. And if you don't, then you can, I mean, they throw the babies away.
Tewannah, we respect your point of view and your faith in the belief that life begins at conception. I just want to, as a fact check, put in here that I knew Senator Jack Gordon of Miami Beach, who was the sponsor of the privacy clause that got passed by the voters of the state of Florida. And in 1980, Jack Gordon told me one of the provisions he wanted that to cover was the right for a woman to have an abortion. So I got it from the guy who sponsored it. So let me just put that out there. But
it wasn't in the record, and that wasn't the majority, Michael. When you look at the intent and you look at the other, you know, you can't just look at one individual. it's just like the 15-week ban. There was talk about going to a all-out ban or going to a 6-week ban. And you know how this works with you. You're a political commentator. You know how it works with getting all the votes and getting everybody on board and how, rigorous that whole process is. That's why we're at 15 and not at 6.
It's a complicated process, no question.
It is a complicated process.
Tewannah and Mayte, we have, Glenna and I have many more questions. Stay where you are. We'll be right back.
Sure.
That's good.
We are back speaking about Florida's new abortion law, where it is, where it stands, with Mayte Canino from Planned Parenthood and Tewannah Aman from Broward's Right to Life chapter. Tewannah brought up something interesting, Mayte, that I'd like to get your perspective on. In the last segment, she was talking about how women that she has come across use abortion, the choice for abortion, almost as an alternative to contraception. And I heard actually a lot of that as part of the debate in Tallahassee as this bill was moving forward. And yet there are so many other women with so many other instances. And one of the things that this bill does not have an exception for is pregnancy via crimes like rape or incest or human trafficking. And Mayte, the lack of that exception, I'm wondering if you have ever encountered or counseled any women who find themselves victimized like that, who now, it seems at this point, will have to carry those babies to term.
Yeah, it's a very cruel bill because it doesn't have its exceptions. We did have people that went to Tallahassee and spoke about their lived experience and what had happened to them growing up in a household with incest, being victims of rape, and how there was no exception to this law. And when they were testifying after, there were members that would say, well, in the end of the day, you would have just had to carry it and that's it. And taking away what they have experienced and the trauma that they had gone through. And it's very sad for someone to travel with Tallahassee and have to hear that when they probably felt that it was their fault, that they were victims for all those years, or that one instant that the victim always blames themselves. Also, the conversation about using abortion as birth control is one that raises a stigma against women that have to access it for many different reasons. At Planned Parenthood, we actually do educate people about birth control, and we not only educate them about birth control, but we advocate for extension of birth control being more accessible to people. One thing that we saw this legislative session was the removal in the budget of LARCs, long-acting reversible contraception, being removed to be able to pay the inserting and removing these LARCs. That comes with a heavy cost if you don't have insurance. So we educate people on birth control. We offer them that even after they come to access an abortion. We don't stigmatize them. We don't blame them. We give them the care that they need and also the education that's needed of them. Each person has a different lived experience. I would never disregard a person's lived experience of what they have gone through to reach where they're at.
Yeah. Tewannah, let me cite a study I read recently and get your comment on it. It said that the majority of women who seek an abortion are in their late 20s, early 30s. They have 2 children already, and for economic or other reasons, maybe they've then separated from their husband, that they just, for a variety of reasons, do not want to have a child. What would you say as a counselor to that woman?
Well, I think that, Michael, we all can attest to having difficulties in our lives, growing up with trauma, growing up in abusive homes, even in broken relationships. We all have a testimony. And I think that when a woman comes to us, we're wanting to give her hope. We know that women have suffered after abortion. There's Silent No More, which is a website that has thousands of testimonies of men and women. That's only one of the many I can quote, but of women and men who have come out and said, I understand now it was a life. They didn't give me the development of the unborn. They didn't tell me what would happen during the abortion procedure to the unborn child. And that's how I came to the realization of what abortion was. I heard it on a broadcast. I didn't believe it. I went online. I did some studying and research. And that's what set me into a state of depression and a spiraling downward. So we're helping women understand that we have resources. We have the ability, if they need a place to stay. We have counseled, Michael and Glenna, we have counseled hundreds and hundreds of women that have kept their babies, and we've walked them through the pregnancy. This idea that we would just let them keep their babies and all we care about is the child. It's not true. We want to love them both. We're for women and children, but we believe that every child is a wanted child. Adoption is always an option. I know individuals like Rebecca Kessling, a wonderful attorney, a pro-life speaker international, Pam Stencil, an abstinence speaker. They were conceived in rape, and they say to you, why don't I have a right to be here?
So before we run out of time, just one more question about the law as it stands now. In Florida's new law, the consequences go to those, and this is a quote out of the law, the consequences go to those who actively participate in terminating a pregnancy. Mayte, are you concerned that Planned Parenthood, either your chapter or others, might be targeted by this law in some way?
What we're seeing now, it's a healthcare crisis. There's going to be a point that pregnant women are going to go to emergency rooms because they're having problems in the pregnancies, and doctors are not going to want to care for them because they're afraid, what are they going to do? What are the repercussions that are going to be due? How about if this isn't a topic pregnancy? What do they do? What is the problem with the pregnancy? We're going to get to that point of people not being doctors who are there to help medically people not being able to do what they have been trained to do medically. So yeah, there will be repercussions. There will be people policing other people, and we're going to go back to the days where women were going to unsafe places and dying because they did not receive the proper care that they needed.
Mayte, if I can jump in here, we only have a few seconds left. You know, people who want to have a baby and have to go through in vitro fertilization, is there a possibility that a woman who has stored embryos and they're frozen, will she have to keep those embryos frozen, or will her order to destroy the embryos, will that be considered a violation of this law?
What we're seeing is there's a possibility for everything. Who would have thought there was going to be a law in the books that doesn't even look at a person that has been a victim of rape or incest or trafficking? Medically, yes, when you do in vitro, there are some unhealthy fertilized eggs that will not grow. So that's part of it. So we could see anything at this point.
I just want to throw out there the suggestion that an embryo would not have been reaching the 15-week mark. So that might be, a consideration as well. In any case, great discussion, and we thank you so much, both Mayte
thanks
Canino,
for having
Tewannah
us.
Aman, for sure, and we'll have you on again. Thanks.
Yeah, please. Thank you. It was an honor.
Thank you both very much.